Mr. President, I've come to the floor once again to make an attempt at passing a very important common sense piece of legislation that is bipartisan, that helps to ensure that the drinking water supplies in northern Ohio on Lake Erie and frankly throughout our state with freshwater reservoirs and other lakes that are providing water and also around the country, to make sure that that will be something that the United States federal government is helping on as much as possible through new legislation to get the EPA more involved. I bring this legislation to the floor for the third time in the last several days to try to pass it. I do so with the hopes we can get this done tonight. I thank my colleague from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, who has been co-sponsoring and supporting me on this effort. I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for working with us on this. We've been working for several weeks to get this cleared. Most recently, we had an issue with regard to legislation the Democrats wanted to add to it. I think we've resolved those issues now. I want to thank Robert Duncan of the floor staff here for working so closely with us on this, and I want to thank my colleague from Rhode Island, Senator Whitehouse, for working with us on this. This is legislation that is both important and urgent. This week marks the one-year anniversary since the water supplies for Toledo, Ohio had to be cut off because of the fact that there were toxic algal blooms in the lake going into the water intake system. 500,000 people were told you can't drink the water. It was a crisis. I was up there. I was passing out bottled water along with others. And unfortunately, we're now seeing this year toxic algal blooms growing again. And we're seeing it not just near the water intake valve for the city of Toledo, but also near other water intake valves where 3 million Ohioans get their drinking water from Lake Erie. And by the way, about 8 million people get water from Lake Erie from other states, including Michigan and other states represented here in this chamber. I'm also very concerned by the fact that we have other reservoirs in Ohio that are seeing increased levels of toxic algal blooms. This includes Grand Lake St. Mary's, it includes Buckeye Lake, it includes the reservoirs in Columbus. So it's time to ensure we're doing everything we possibly can at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level to be able to ensure that we can deal with this issue, that it can be resolved. Finally, I will say that this is not just about drinking water. It's also about the recreational value of these waterways, including, of course, Lake Erie, which is an incredibly important economic asset for the state of Ohio, our #1 destination for tourism. Having been on the lake a couple weeks ago fishing, I will tell you that toxic algal blooms make a huge difference and create a real problem for the recreational value of fishing, but also people being able to use the beaches, people being concerned about having their pets in the water, people being concerned about the fact that their kids may not be safe even being close to these bodies of water. So we have already passed legislation previously to help get the federal government more involved. About a year ago, we passed legislation to get the EPA, but also NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, USGS, and other federal entities more involved and engaged and working better together. We've also passed legislation to try to help generally with regard to getting EPA to give us what the standards ought to be in terms of the drinking water. Now it's time to pass this legislation that requires the EPA to put out a report on how to mitigate the problem, how to encourage the local community and incentivize the local community to do more in terms of ensuring the intake valves are in the right place, to ensure the treatment is done properly, to provide the good science and the best practices that only the EPA can provide to be able to help with regard to the very serious problem that we face on Lake Erie and throughout the state of Ohio. With that, Mr. President, what I'd like to do is call up the legislation. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate now proceed to H.R. 212, which is at the desk, and that the bill be read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill with no intervening action or debate.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 212, an act to amend the Safe Drinking Water Act to provide for the assessment and management of the risk of algal toxins in drinking water and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that the motion be reconsidered and laid upon the table.
No. If the senator will withhold his motion. If there's no further debate on the measure. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The measure is passed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator
President, Senate, the motion be reconsidered, to reconsider be made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.